No one expected Candace Brown to stand a chance when two black belts tried to humiliate her in front of everyone. Caden and Blake were sure their skills and swagger would keep them on top, making their taunts feel invincible. But Candace had something they overlooked, a hidden strength and quiet determination that turned every insult into fuel. The moment fate flipped the script, justice hit the mat. Hard. Just wait until you see how this stunning reversal unfolded, and why respect won out in the end. The late afternoon sun filtered through tall gym windows, turning the air into a golden haze. Every sound, the squeak of sneakers, the snap of belts, the disciplined rhythm of breaths, echoed like a synchronized heartbeat. The scent of sweat, fabric cleaner, and faint chalk dust hung motionless, as if time itself paused between every strike and kick. Candace Brown stood near the entrance, watching from the shadowed edge of the room. Her hands clutched the strap of her backpack, a small nervous gesture she repeated when she felt eyes on her. She wore a simple hoodie and black leggings, not the white uniform that filled the room like a wave of confidence. Her figure, rounder and softer than most, reflected in the mirror wall across from her, an echo of difference and doubt. She had arrived early, far earlier than necessary. Curiosity had brought her here, but courage kept her inside longer than she expected. For months she had passed the dojo windows on her way home, hearing the sharp sounds of movement and imagining what it would be like to belong there, to have control, power, balance. It wasn't just about the martial art itself, it was about what it meant. Discipline, strength, respect. Words that felt distant in a world where she was often reduced to whispers and stares. The students lined up across the mats, their stances confident, their gazes forward. Two of them, Caden and Blake, were older, around 17, tall and athletic, with black belts tied around their waists. They had the posture of boys who knew they were admired. Their movements were sharp and casual, at once effortless power that seemed designed to be noticed. Candace tried to focus on the instructor, but their murmurs caught her attention. "Who's she?" Blake asked with a mocking tilt of his head. His voice wasn't loud, but the tone carried. Caden smirked. "Maybe she just came to watch, man. Or maybe she wants to try. Looks like she could use a little conditioning." The quiet laughter that followed was thin and sharp, like the click of metal against glass. A few nearby students smiled uneasily but said nothing. Candace's face heated. Her heart quickened, yet she stayed frozen. Her first instinct was to leave, to turn around before someone else noticed her discomfort, but something in her wouldn't move. Mr. Harris, the instructor, noticed the tension. A seasoned man in his mid-40s with graying hair and calm eyes, he held authority without raising his voice. "Let's stay focused," he said, simply. The tone was steady and final. The room fell quiet, the mockery muted for now. Candace shifted slightly closer to the wall, observing the flow of practice with careful attention. Every stance seemed like a silent promise, an act of commitment she'd never dared to make. The patterns were mesmerizing. Precision masked in calm, effort concealed behind grace. She watched the repetition of strikes, the fluid transition between defense and attack. Each movement looked impossible and perfect, but as minutes turned to an hour, something strange began to form in her chest, something deeper than hurt. It was not defiance, not yet. It was a quiet flame. Her pulse became steady, her breathing deliberate, as if she was slowly sinking with the rhythm of the room. When the class ended, laughter returned. Belts were untied, uniforms loosened, confidence relaxed. Caden tossed his gloves onto the mat, turning to Blake with a grin. "Easy day. Guess not everyone's built for this, huh?" His voice was casual, loud enough for her to hear, but not so direct that anyone could accuse him of cruelty. That was his specialty, mockery, disguised as humor. Mr. Harris walked toward Candace as she lingered by the equipment rack. "You've been watching carefully," he said. His tone wasn't pitying. It was observant. Candace nodded, uncertain. "I've thought about joining," she said finally. Her voice barely carried, but he heard every word. He gave her a small professional smile, the kind that encouraged without exaggeration. "You could," he said simply. "We take new students every week. You don't need strength to start. just perseverance. "I don't know if I'd fit in," she admitted. "Fitting in?" Mr. Harris looked around the gym, where the last few students were packing up. "That's not the goal. You learn to stand stronger, and eventually that takes care of everything else." His words settled deeply. She looked again at the mats, where confidence and balance seemed to live, and wondered if she could earn a place there not by belonging, but by fighting for it. As she left the building, sunset light fell across her path. The world outside was slow and ordinary. The hum of distant traffic, children laughing near the park, the rustle of paper from a passing cyclist. Yet in that stillness, something changed. She paused at the sidewalk, tightening her backpack strap, and turned her eyes back toward the gym door. Inside she had seen the best and the worst of human nature reflected in movement, in silence, in small cruelties. But beyond the hurt, she had glimpsed power. Not the kind that mocked, but the kind that was built slowly, breath by breath. That night Candace didn't sleep much. She typed beginner martial arts moves into her phone, replaying tutorials again and again. Her arms ached by the third video, but she didn't stop. Somewhere between exhaustion and resolve, she finally smiled, a small, quiet smile that belonged only to her. Tomorrow she would come back, and no one would be ready for what she carried within. The sun had barely risen when Candace woke, her resolve sharper than any lingering insecurity. She moved quietly through her morning rituals, preparing for the day ahead. In her small kitchen, she ate breakfast without rush, replaying in her mind every detail from the gym, the laughter, the glances, the confidence of those who wore their power like a cloak. This time she did not let the memory weigh her down. She held on to the words Mr. Harris had spoken. Perseverance mattered more than being ready. By mid-morning, Candace arrived at the gym. She wore clean sports clothes and a quiet determination on her face. There was tension in her shoulders, but an undercurrent of purpose kept her from slipping back into the shadows. The other students were already warming up, their routines polished and familiar. She joined them, feeling out of place, but refusing to allow this feeling to control her actions. As the training started, Candace took a spot at the end of the line. Mr. Harris led the class through stretches and simple forms. For most, the movements were easy. For Candace, they were challenging, her balance unsteady, her muscles slower to respond. Still, she tried each motion, focusing on her breathing and the instructions. She remembered what she had learned during her late-night video marathons, the importance of standing firm, planting her feet, and following the rhythm. Blake moved closer, purposefully bumping into her as the group stepped through a defensive turn. "Careful," he murmured, just loud enough for those nearby to hear. He wore his belt with pride, glancing down at Candace as if she was unworthy of sharing the mat. Caden smirked, making a quiet remark to another student. The air was heavy with unspoken judgments, the kind that never needed saying but always hung between every look and gesture. Candace fought the urge to withdraw, focusing instead on the pattern of her breath and the instructions the instructor gave. Where others moved easily, she moved with effort, but each repetition chipped away at her uncertainty. Between exercises, Mr. Harris called for volunteers to demonstrate a new hold. Blake stepped up eagerly. "Mind if I show it to her?" he said, nodding at Candace. His tone was casual, but the question was edged with challenge. The instructor paused a moment before nodding, his eyes unreadable. Blake advanced quickly, showing off for the group as he tried to whirl Candace into a lock, expecting her to be passive and slow. But Candace had practiced, and this time she responded not with aggression, but with determination and quick thinking. She ducked out of the hold, stepping to the side in a way she had seen countless times in her online lessons. There was a beat of surprise. The demonstration faltered, the confidence in Blake's gesture wavering. He recovered quickly, rolling his eyes, but Candace felt a flicker of pride. She had refused to be cornered, refused to let his confidence define her response. Throughout the training, Candace found herself pushed and tested, her motivation crystallizing into purpose. The remarks and glances became fuel rather than obstacles. As the group broke into pairs for sparring practice, Candace caught her reflection in the gym mirror. For a moment she saw herself not as the outsider, but as someone determined to belong on her own terms. By the end of the class, sweat soaked her shirt, Her muscles ached, and her spirit felt altered. The journey would be long, but for the first time she sensed the possibility of change, of claiming her own place, built with every patient practice, every persistent breath. On the way out, Mr. Harris approached. "You showed a lot of heart today," he told her quietly. "That matters more here than anything else." Candace nodded, a tired but genuine smile forming on her lips. As she walked home, the city lights grew brighter and the air cooler, but inside her, resolve burned stronger than ever. The battle for acceptance was just beginning, and she was determined not to let anyone else fight it for her. The gym was crowded, warm with the energy of students moving through drills and demonstrations. Candace stood near the center, her brow furrowed in concentration, absorbing all she could from the instructor's instructions. Every motion was deliberate, every breath slow and controlled. The other students moved fluidly, some joking and smiling between their sets, while others practiced in focused silence. When Mr. Harris began pairing students for partner exercises, he looked toward Candace. She hesitated only for a moment before stepping up. The memory of yesterday's humiliation lingered at the edges of her mind, but she forced herself to let it fuel her determination. She could feel the scrutiny from Caden and Blake, both ready to prove something more to the class than to themselves. Blake cracked his knuckles, smirked, and positioned himself across from Candace. Caden watched with pretended indifference, arms folded over his chest. Mr. Harris instructed the duo to demonstrate a classic defense, how to break free from a grip and counter it with a simple throw. Blake tried to make a show of the move, gripping Candace's arm with force. The class murmured among themselves, some expecting Candace to freeze or stumble. But she recalled her solo practice last night, the pattern of motion she'd rehearsed in her dimly lit living room. Steadying herself, Candace twisted slightly, lowering her center of gravity, using her weight and momentum to counter the hold. The throw was not perfect, but it was effective. Blake lost balance, stumbling forward and onto his knees. A hush fell across the gym. Caden stepped forward, clearly annoyed at Blake's slip, and challenged Candace. The demonstration repeated this time. Caden pushed harder, underestimating both her strength and her preparation. Candace mirrored her earlier move, this time with smoother execution. The sound of Caden hitting the mat was louder than Blake's, and shock etched itself onto his face. The class was stunned. For the first time, Candace's presence on the mat was not a source of laughter or doubt, but a spark of silent respect. The instructor nodded approvingly, not just for the technical aspects of her moves, but for the composure and confidence she demonstrated. A wave of surprise, then admiration, moved through the group. Candace felt the shift, not only in how others saw her, but in how she saw herself. The fear and uncertainty of yesterday had become the foundation of self-respect and growth. For a moment the gym belonged to her, filled with possibility, echoing with newfound respect. All the effort, practice, and quiet persistence had led to this turning point. The instructor paused the class, his voice firm and proud. "This is why we train," he said, meeting Candace's eyes. "Discipline, courage, and strength, these matter more than any belt." Candace stood taller, feeling lighter, each breath a testament to determination. And in the silence that followed, she knew she no longer needed to prove herself to anyone but herself. The gym was suffused with a new energy as Saturday morning arrived, the bright light filtering through the tall windows and casting long, warming beams onto the mats. Candace stood amid the hum of focused preparation, now a familiar figure who had moved from the fringes to the heart of the dojo community. Today was no ordinary class. It was the day for sparring matches, a rite of passage for many students, where skill met courage in measured bouts. The air was thick with anticipation, and the soft murmur of parents and peers gathered around the edges of the room. Candace's heartbeat quickened, not from fear, but from the concentration she'd cultivated over weeks of hard work. The sweat on her brow sparkled in the light, mingling with the tangible intensity of the moment. Mr. Harris had divided the class into pairs. Candace's name was called last. She met Caden's steady gaze across the room. The boy who had once dismissed her with a sneer now returned her look with a mix of curiosity and caution. Caden was strong, confident just as before, but the sharp edge of arrogance had softened, replaced by respect, though not without hesitation. As they bowed toward each other, the room fell silent, except for the muted shuffling of feet and the soft rustle of their uniforms. The briefest pause stretched, neither moved first. Then Caden launched into the opening strike, a swift jab intended to test her reflexes. Candace felt the rush of movement, but instead of reacting hastily, she relied on her breath, grounding herself. The moment was no longer simply about reaction, but about understanding the flow of energy and intention. She sidestepped, her weight shifting subtly and efficiently, blocking the strike with the outer edge of her forearm. The sound was light, but it held the unspoken message. She was ready. Caden tried to regain control with a higher kick, deliberate and fast, but Candace anticipated the angle, a sharp pivot of her hips, a measured step back, and his foot passed harmlessly through her space. His eyes widened slightly in surprise. Across the gym, the whispers began to swirl. Observers caught the shift. They saw the grace in Candace's movements, the thought behind every block and counter. It was no longer about size or past mockery. It was about skill, poise, and an unwavering will. Mr. Harris's voice broke gently through the tension. Control is the heart of martial arts. Strength without control is chaos. Caden nodded earnestly, stepping forward with renewed determination. He launched a series of faster strikes, a flurry of jabs and sweeps aimed to challenge Candace's endurance. She met each move with calm, reading his rhythm and responding with precision. Their sparring became a dance, a silent conversation between two warriors learning respect through motion. Candace seized the moment when Caden slightly overextended, using his momentum to guide him toward the mat with a smooth throw. The sound of his controlled fall echoed softly, bringing a ripple of awareness from onlookers. The energy in the room changed. Applause was hesitant at first, then full and warm, not pity or surprise, but genuine admiration. Candace's cheeks flushed with quiet pride, yet she remained composed, focusing on the lessons unfolding with every breath. Caden rose with a nod of respect, offering a silent apology in his glance. Candace met it with a small smile, acknowledging their shared journey. More than competitors, they were partners in growth, bound by the discipline and respect the art demanded. The class resumed with a new rhythm. The earlier tension softened into camaraderie. Students who had once whispered behind backs now exchanged nods of encouragement, their focus on mastery rather than judgment. Later, as the gym emptied and the sunlight softened, Candace sat beside Mr. Harris on the worn wooden bench. His voice was reflective, full of both warmth and wisdom. "What you've shown isn't just technique," he said. "It's heart. That's harder to teach than any move." Candace nodded, her fingers tracing the stitching on the sleeve of her uniform. "I've learned more about myself here than how to fight." "That's the true power of martial arts," Mr. Harris replied. "It's not the victory over others, but the victory over your own doubts and limits." The walk home was quiet, the city waking up around her with soft sounds and morning light. She thought about the boy who had once seemed so untouchable, now humbled by the unfolding lesson of humility and respect. Her own journey was far from over, but she embraced the path ahead, fragile, challenging, yet full of promise. Candace's room welcomed her in the afternoon glow. She turned to her journal, pen poised over the page, and wrote, "Strength is born from patience, discipline, and the courage to stand when it's easier to fall. This is just the beginning." The GI hung in the corner of her room, a constant reminder not of the battles won or lost, but of the ongoing transformation, a journey not of size or past scars, but of spirit and unyielding determination. Through every step, every breath, Candace carried the quiet power that would one day become undeniable.